Hello, my name is Alex Borucki and I'm the director of the UCI Latin American Studies Center. This clip is part of our series, Cortos Latinoamericanos, Latin American Clips. And here we are with Professor Anita Casavantes Bradford from the UCI Department of Chicano and Latino Studies. Hi, hello Anita, how are you?
Hi, Alex. I'm well. How are you?
Great, great to seeing you. And I think this is the first time I see you for a long time, indeed.
It's been a long time.
We are
Yes.
recording this in late June 2021, indeed. And at this time, I know that your current research or current work is titled Suffer the Little Children, Child Migration and the Geopolitics of Compassion in the United States. And you have been working on the final stages of the writing of the book. Could you tell us about this project and also what is at stake during the final stages of writing the book?
Sure. Well, I guess I should start by saying that I began this project in 2015. So it's now, 6 years of research and writing to complete this book. And I was actually at work at the time in 2015 on a different second book project. My first book was a history of the politics of childhood in Cuba and in Cuban Miami. And I was interested in the way that children were being used as political symbols for different political projects, revolutionary and counter-revolutionary. And as part of that research, of course, I studied the Operation Pedro Pan and the Cuban Children's Program, by which approximately 14,000 unaccompanied Cuban children came to the United States and were placed in foster care between 1960 and 1962. And this is a fairly well-known example of unaccompanied child migration to the United States, which is held up by some as this example of American humanitarianism and a great success, and by others as a sinister CIA plot to destroy Cuban families. It's a very politically contentious topic. But as a result of that first book project, I was working on a second book on the Catholic priest who ran the Cuban Children's Program, because I was trying to dig into and understand what was the nature of this unaccompanied Cuban children migration program. But then in 2015, of course, we experienced a sudden massive upsurge of unaccompanied Central American minors arriving at the US border. And at that time, I was serving as faculty advisor to UCI's Undocumented Students Association. And for many of those students, the media barrage of images of unaccompanied minors, many of them adolescents arriving from Central America, was very emotionally impactful and also very confusing to a lot of them. And so as they were asking me questions about what is the history of unaccompanied child migration? Why are these children arriving? Why are they being rejected? Why is there this moral panic around them? And as I tried to give good answers, I realized that I didn't know enough about the history of unaccompanied child migration to give them the answers that they deserved. But one thing that I did know is that there was a dramatic contrast between the way that unaccompanied Cuban children were treated in the 60s, welcomed, provided with federally funded foster care, and the way that this other wave of migrant children was being treated, right? Detained, deported, demonized. And so I dropped the second book project and began this project. I set myself the somewhat ambitious goal of writing a history of unaccompanied child migration to the United States, which simply didn't exist, right? We have work by legal scholars, by sociologists on more recent examples of unaccompanied child migration, but nothing that located the processes in history. And so I wanted to understand which children had come to the United States alone in the past, which children had been admitted, which had been rejected, and why, right? And so by its nature, this was a comparative project. And it required me to go back to the 1930s, which is when officially recognized unaccompanied child migration to the US really began, and to learn an entirely different literature for each chapter of the book, because each chapter of the book deals with a completely different community of children from a different national origin, from a different moment in US foreign policy and domestic politics. So the first chapter looks at European Jewish children who came to the United States during the 30s, as well as the Spanish Republican children who people attempted to bring to the United States, but who were not admitted. The second chapter looks at British and, again, European Jewish children brought to the United States during the war itself. And then the third chapter looks at post-war displaced children, war orphans coming from Europe, the origins of the inter-country adoption movement in the 50s. The next chapter looks at Hungarian teenagers, mostly adolescent boys, who came to the US alone after the 1956 revolution in Hungary. Next chapter about Cuban unaccompanied children, then Southeast Asian unaccompanied children following the Vietnam War, and then a final chapter on Central American and Mexican unaccompanied child migrants and the origins of today's child migration crisis. So really a very exhausting and very broadly conceived project. So I am now in the final stages. The book officially goes into production on June 30th. So right now it's down to just, all the revisions are completed. Right now it's down to checking the footnotes and the formatting and getting final copyright permission for some of the images we're hoping to use in the books. It's just that final last exhausting bit of work before I can just leave it in the hands of the publisher.
Great, thank you. I mean, for me, seeing you evolving in a second book project in this way, completely out of the new, it's really marvelous.
Thank you.
Indeed. And since again, we're in July, again in July, I really want to be in July, in June 2021. And we are 1 year into the pandemic. I wanted to ask you how this pandemic, COVID-19, have impacted your work and also the work of those of you who you mentor as well.
Yeah, so I guess I would begin by saying that, my family is safe and I have a steady income thanks to the University of California. I've been able to work from home. So, pues gracias a Dios, we are okay. And that is a blessing. And many people have not been okay. I am very conscious of that, right? And so anything that I say about the struggles that I have had during the pandemic should be seen in that broader context. My own awareness that my struggles are minimal compared to what others have struggled, and that I am very grateful for the position that I'm in right now. With that being said, however, the last year and a half of the pandemic, my daughter who just turned 9, has been at home doing online school since March of 2020, I guess. So for more than a year. And this last year was meant to be my, the year that I just focused 100% on writing and just finished the book, right? Ultimately, I did do that, but it wasn't the smooth, totally focused on writing experience that I had been expecting, right? I had expected to drop my daughter at school every morning and then go and have uninterrupted time to write. And instead, I've been working upstairs. My goddaughter who lives with us is working 1 room away. My daughter is working downstairs in the dining room, doing her school. My husband has been working in the kitchen. And as anybody who's ever written a book knows, the need for deep concentration, to be able to lose yourself in the ideas, to struggle to put it all together, that's real. And it's very hard to enter a state of deep concentration with, an 8-year-old child in the dining room getting frustrated because she's doing math online and she's finished 5 minutes in and everyone else needs another 15 minutes, right? So, keeping her on track while trying to stay in the writing zone has been incredibly challenging. But I've learned a lot about what academic writing is. I think I have finally burned away any illusions that I had that writing is this solitary pursuit where you can wait until inspiration comes and then just write. And that has really been replaced by, I would say, a very working class understanding of writing as pues la chamba. Sit your butt in a chair and just produce some words. And, it's not going to be pretty. There may be no inspiration. You might be exhausted, but get out of bed and punch your time card, do the work, right? And I think that in that sense, I'm a first generation college graduate from a very low income family, from a very working class family. And I think that I was able to draw on the example of my family members, my own experience working as a waitress, as a nanny during college, to just remind myself, get in the headspace, do your job, right? So this book has not been a beautiful intellectual journey. It has been a day-to-day grind, but it's done. So yay. Now, I would like to say that for the graduate students that I mentor, for the undergraduate students that I work very intensively with, many of whom are Latinx immigrants from undocumented families, from low-income backgrounds, this past year has been excruciating. The number of students who have shared with me that family members have died, that they have spent days going back and forth between online classes and the hospital to care for relatives who were in a prolonged process of suffering. The students whose families have lost their employment, who've lost their homes, who have been hungry. I am so impacted by the stories that I've been told. And I am so impressed by those students' persistence, their determination to stay in school, right? Considering how hard it has been. But they know, just like anybody from a first-gen low-income background knows, education is our lifeline. It is our way to a better future. And so you hold on to that lifeline, right? Even in the hardest of times. But this has been a uniquely difficult time for our students.
Thank you very much for this. And thank you very much for your work with these students, which it's the happiness also that bringing us to do more as well. And with this, well, I shall say goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. It was really good to see you again. And I look forward to being back on campus and to collaborating in the future.
Great. And see you next year, indeed.
All right. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you.